Good morning, everybody. I'm Kimberly Barrett, Councillor for Milton and Cabinet Member for Climate Change and Environment. Welcome everyone today to this Cabinet briefing and Cabinet decision meeting. A few bits of information, so housekeeping and safety information. If the continuous fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the room and public gallery by the stairwells. Do not attempt to use the lifts, and we will assemble at Queen Victoria's statue in front of the civic offices. In order to comply with the Guildhall Trust fire marshal regulations, anyone who signed in at the reception desk downstairs should sign out when leaving the building at the end of today's meeting. Please, can everyone use the microphones? Remember to switch them off when they're finished, otherwise the camera will stick with your lovely face through the meeting. I will start off with introductions around the room. So I'll start off with, well, I don't know if anyone can see, we've got lovely Josh in the corner here on the right-hand side. Josh is from the news, and then I'll start off with Russell then.
Councillor Russell Simpson, Hilsey Ward.
Councillor Charlotte Gerardo, Central Southsea.
Daniel Williams, Public Health Principal.
Zoe White, Green and Healthy City Coordinator, Public Health.
And Christina Downey, Climate Change. Port City Council, sorry, I forgot that.
Jane Dodino, Local Democracy Officer.
Brilliant, thank you everyone. Just to check, Jane, are there any apologies for today's meeting?
None, Chair.
No, thank you. And any declarations from anybody at all? No. Fantastic. Okay, then we'll jump straight in then. So I will jump straight to greening the city funding application criteria. So is that Zoe or is that Dan? Perfect.
Thanks, Councillor Barrett. This initiative is aligned with the Cabinet's tackling the climate crisis priority, but it also contributes to the improving our city priority. We're asking the Cabinet member to consider and approve criteria for awarding grant applications from the Green City Capital Fund and to ensure we have a consistent and transparent framework for the funding process. The proposed funding rounds for this financial year will take place later this month and prior to the winter planting season, and then again in March 23. Recommendations-wise, the report asks the Cabinet member to approve the criteria for internal and external grant applications from community groups using the application and scoring process outlined in Appendix B, and to agree to award $15,000 from the total capital fund to community projects in the first of two funding rounds in the financial year, with the amount for the second to be determined on the basis of interest in the first. Were we to go for the same amount in the second funding round, we would therefore be making 30k available out of an overall greening budget of 100k. Although, as I say, we could potentially enlarge the pot for the second funding round depending on interest. The rest of the budget is being spent on a variety of greening projects led by PCC and Zoe in her role of Green and Healthy City Coordinator, and some of the work undertaken in the last 12 to 18 months is detailed in section 3.4 of the report. Through making a pot of money available, we're keen to enable community groups to apply for funding to support the development of community-led projects in their neighbourhoods, with the benefit of growing both community engagement in the greening agenda and community cohesion. There will be a maximum grant of £5,000 per project. The funding could also be requested as a match funding exercise for larger projects. The backdrop to this proposal is that the city only has around 9.8% tree canopy cover, compared to an average 16% in most English towns and cities. There is a clear correlation between inequality and access to green space in the city. In some of the most deprived areas of the city, 43% of dwellings have no outdoor space. The co-benefits of greening are substantial, especially for our most vulnerable communities. Addressing climate risks by reducing flooding and heat risk and increasing biodiversity, improving mental and physical health by promoting active travel, connecting people with nature, creating social capital and promoting the economy through job creation. To these ends, the initiative is looking to promote greening projects across the city and works towards the commitment in our greening strategy to double the canopy cover over the next 25 years. A robust framework has been developed to allow all funding bids to be considered through an application process using a simple scoring matrix followed by an assessment at panel, and that's attached as Appendix B to the report. As well as robust, the application process aims to be both transparent and fair. An assessment panel will be formed comprising members of PCC's Green Team with both PCC and non-PCC representatives, including elected members and officers from relevant services, Culture and Leisure, Finance, Landscape Architect Team and Climate Strategy. We will also invite representatives from external stakeholders such as Hampshire and Isle of Wight Wildlife Trust to guest on the panel. Projects will be expected to deliver against the objectives of the Portsmouth Greening Strategy listed in Part D of Appendix B, the application form. There are 4 general funding round priorities that projects will need to address in the first funding round. Priority 1 being tree planting to increase canopy cover across the city. Priority 2, planting for nature and biodiversity gain. Priority 3, environmentally focused to create a lasting community impact. And priority 4, engaging the community with particular focus around children and young people in greening projects and connecting with nature. We may add further priorities for each subsequent individual funding round in future, with the aim of trying to target particular shortfalls or tackle new development priorities as these change or arise. A project will also need to demonstrate that it provides added value in the following areas: levelling up, placemaking, improving health and inequalities, creating social capital, improved community safety and cohesion, and improved health outcomes both in terms of physical and mental health. Alongside the opportunity presented here, a whole council approach to advice on applying for funding is being developed, effectively a crib sheet for applicants explaining the process and where to turn for help. And we will of course align our process here with that separate initiative with Zoe on the group steering it. Zoe and I are happy to take any questions you have.
Thank you very much. Before I jump in, I don't know if Russell or Charlotte, whether either of you two have any questions or comments at the moment? No? Charlotte?
Thank you, Councillor Barrett, thank you. And thank you for presenting that. Overall, I think it's a fantastic opportunity for Portsmouth and for the community. And so thank you to council officers for putting all the time into putting the application together and the process for it. Just to sort of say, I would really support more money going into the fund because when obviously the Labour group helped to bolster the fund back in the budget, we were very keen to use this fund as an opportunity to really engage local communities in greening, because obviously we know the more that local communities take leadership on environmental issues in their own areas, the more likely it will lead to behaviour change and things like that. So very much support the encouragement of grassroots groups and residents to be able to apply to this fund and support putting more money into it. It's great to hear that there'll be a crib sheet, because that was going to be one of my questions, just because I think it would be good to really clarify in the application form exactly what's required of residents in terms of evidence and that sort of thing. I was going to ask as well if there'll be like a kind of official launch of the fund and then like a really clear landing page on PCC's website, because at the moment with the Equalities Fund that's up, it's not really clear. You have to email a council officer, and that's not great in terms of obviously trying to widen the reach. So that was one of the questions I had. And then I do have points about the form. Shall I pause on that and then we can come to that later, or how best would you like to take it, Chair?
I'll let, is it Zoe? Sorry, do you want to jump in? I'll let Zoe answer that and then we can jump back to that if that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
For the launch of the fund, our comms team are already working on that, so we hope to have quite a big launch. We really want it to be accessible. Christina started the work for us really last week with the Greening City. What did we call it?
Climate Action Network from the Hive.
There we go, the Climate Action Network from the Hive, that we attended last week, and there was lots of community groups that attended that event. So we started to collate lists of local groups and people, so we know who to target, and there's going to be other work going on to have like a virtual notice board that we can let community groups know about. And as I say, our comms team are working at the moment on a campaign to launch the first round. So we want to make sure that it's really accessible.
Russell.
Well, just to follow up on that, because I know quite a lot of community groups in Hilsey. I mean, Hilsey is incredibly green as it already is, but that's probably one of the reasons why there's a lot of people that are interested in it. Is there going to be, from a marketing point of view, just to follow up on what Charlotte was saying, is there going to be some form of leaflet going through the door, or, very similar to the solar panels back in a couple of years ago where everyone got a letter saying you are entitled to X, Y and Z. Is that going to be the same with this scheme? Is what I'm trying to say is there opportunities for new groups to start to then take access of this fund?
We hadn't thought about leaflet drop-in, but it's not to say it can't be considered. But we are working with an officer who manages some of the library services, who's launching a campaign in Paulsgrove during the October half-term to engage community groups in planting. So we were planning on attending that event to try and reach some out-of-city groups.
To follow that up, and I almost sound like a repeating parrot of this, because Portsmouth doesn't have a community centre or a library, so actually the access to things like that are a little bit more difficult in some other areas. So that's the reason why I'm more for leaflet, is we just don't have those centres in place.
The event that they're planning is to do with Paulsgrove Outdoor Adventure Playground and the community centre that's there. And then working up on the Highbury estate and focusing around that area and parts of Cosham. But yeah, we certainly can consider leaflets. It's not something we thought of, but I can mention that to the comms team.
Thank you. We'll jump back to Charlotte if that's okay.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. Just on page 14, where it asks about organisations' bank account details, I just wondered if there was like residents down a road that wanted to, I don't know, improve greening in tree pits down their street and they weren't part of like a formal organisation, how could they then access this fund? Would they sort of need to go to like, I know for example the Fawcett Road Greening Group in my ward has gone through Havelock Community Centre and they've let them use their bank account, so would it have to be a sort of setup like that, or how would that work?
I think if it's for something like tree pits, we could work it so that the payment went straight to the team that are going to do the work. So all the tree pits are colas, so it would be an internal kind of moving of money, but that money would be committed to that project. I think it would have to work like that. The reason that we ask for bank accounts is learning from the experience we've just had. And when I tried to put the payments through the first time before we had to move on for other issues, finance said that they needed something a bit more robust than just a bank account number to pay the money into. So for our financial services, they wanted to see that the businesses or community groups we were working with were financially secure and everything was above board, so that's why we've had to include it. And we spoke to the Jubilee Fund and SIL, and they said that they ask the same, and it's all to do with financial services, wanting to make sure everything is in place as it should be. But there has to be a workaround for smaller groups. I think we might have to kind of learn as we grow with this, because we don't know who's going to approach us. Sorry, I can't give a better answer than that at the moment.
That's great, thank you. And maybe that could be like an illustrative example or something, like in the summary sheet that the overview that you're providing, because then there's not like a sort of financial risk to the council, because like you say, it's just an internal movement of money, isn't it? In terms of the landowner permission, I just wondered, how would a resident find out who a landowner is? Would they have to go to would they have to look up that themselves, or could the council help them find out, or would they have to go to the land registry?
We can help. I can look that up on the mapping service. So I'm hoping that as groups come together, they will ask, and then we'll tell them who the landowner is and point them in the right direction. Again, this is going to be where this crib sheet is really going to help, because we can give direction on that as to how people get the information that they need before they start asking for grants. So, but we've got that in place to help.
Sorry, I didn't see this before in the briefing meeting. That's why I've got so many questions. Sorry. Great. Just in terms of the essential criteria on 16. Just thinking the crib sheet, it would be really helpful to be quite explicit about, for example, like with A, the expectations around the maintenance plan, and like giving detail of, what you expect to see, and maybe even like a template, for example, so that people know what information they need to provide. And with like F, for example, where it says you should contact the community safety team, like including on the crib sheet a contact for that, just, you know, obvious things. I'm just trying to think of the barriers that, you know, a lay resident who hasn't applied for something like this before, you know, might experience. And again, like with F, community engagement, you know, what do you mean by that? Are you expecting a survey, or can this be conversations? How does it need to be recorded? And yeah, then the question about, so with G, again, will PCC provide support with things like health and safety policies? Because again, I'm just thinking of, you know, neighbours down the road. They're not likely to obviously have insurance and health and safety policies in place. So is that something that will, again, be considered depending on what they're applying for, and will PCC be able to help guide residents?
I think what we'd like to see is the crib sheet direct people in the right way about what they need and how to present it. So, for example, with sort of health and safety and risk assessments, if it was a project within the grounds of an existing, say, community centre or space that's not on a public highway or on a ground, the risk is minimal, the health and safety is already dealt with within the realms of that building, so there might not be a lot of questions to answer, but where there is, the idea is that this crib sheet will direct people and give some examples of what that might look like. We're not asking for hugely lengthy pieces of evidence, but just to show that where there is risk, it's been considered, and where there is health and safety risk, it's been considered. So, for example, the purpose of putting that in there was if we had a community planting day and children were going to be there, and there might be machinery or things like that in place, that we've considered all of those suitable risks. But yeah, I agree that the crib sheet will be really helpful to explain some of these points.
Sorry, last page, and then that's the end of me, I promise. Just on the final page, then page 18, on the point about constitutional rules, I obviously really understand why you would want something like that in there, but again, I'm just thinking about our Fawcett Road Greening Group in Central Southsea. Although they are quite established as a group, I don't know if they have a constitution. So would that mean that they would then not be able to apply, even though they are actually doing lots of really good greening projects? And they also got the Jubilee grant, for example. And again, just the policies around safeguarding children, will there be some examples that people can use and adapt?
I take your point about the constitutional rules. If it's not an established formal group, you might not have those, but we can give an explanation about rules you might want to put in place, about like who's managing the project, who's looking after it, who's taking responsibility for it. That's kind of what we're looking for, so we've got some ownership and responsibility for the money. With the safeguarding children and adults, I think we're going to have a think about that, about how we advise on that. Did you want to add anything else to that, Dan, at this stage?
Yes, as Zoe says, I think we need to sort of reflect on that and add that kind of advice to the crib sheet.
Yeah, it's a tricky one, because you would want groups to have thought about these things if you bring in, safeguarding all adults and children anyway. If it's a fairly new kind of really informal community group in a local area, the crib sheet can certainly guide what that should look like. I don't know how much of it we should do for people. I think I really need to think about it.
Thank you. I was just going to say that it obviously depends on the nature of the project as well, doesn't it? If it's simply tree planting or as an event, then it won't have the same safeguarding implications as another longer programme that would involve school children, for example. So it will probably have to be seen on a case-by-case basis. But I think it's an important point that we will take back and have a think about. Thank you.
Any other questions? No? Brilliant. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone, for answering all those questions. I think it's really useful, and obviously some feedback to take from that, especially with the safeguarding thing. We could definitely look at it some more. I've got to say I am really excited about this going forward. I mean, since Josh kindly put this in the news the other day, I've already had some groups and individuals come forward and ask me about the application process. Especially the fact that and a lot of people I speak to, they think that we're after these absolutely huge projects that are going to cost tens of thousands of pounds, whereas there are a lot of community groups, like Charlotte has said, that may only need a couple hundred to do some really nice bulb planting or some whip planting or, just little projects. So this gives us the opportunity to be able to look at small areas, and it's my new favourite saying, so green the grey as much as possible around this city, but give the opportunity for the community to have a bit of ownership and, do what they can to improve the areas they live in, whether it's a street or a small patch of area or community centre. So I'm really excited about this going forward. I'm really looking forward to see what comes forward. I completely agree with you. I'm hoping that so many people apply for it that this, I suppose it's almost like a trial so far to see how this goes initially, but I'm hoping that so many people apply that we can then look in the next round of funding to increase that and of course spread, and I really hope anyone who's listening that this is across the whole city, so not just south but north. There are a lot of projects that we could do in your area, Russell, there's stuff in Paulsgrove, and I just want to make it very clear that we can do this across the whole city. There always seems to be this thought that it's just Southsea that we're trying to do, but there's so many other places across the city, and particularly when I last spoke to Andy Ames last week, his aim this year is to sort of head from Fratton upwards, because he thinks that Southsea's in safe hands at the moment, so he's looking now to extend up to the north and work there. So I think it's really good. I'm really pleased to put this through, and I just really look forward to seeing what comes through, and please do apply. So look out for the comms for that anyway. So thank you very much for that. We will now move on to the next equally very important and very exciting point. So I'll pass on to Christina.
Thank you very much. I'm, again, always very pleased to present things, but I'm very pleased to present this information report about a number of international climate change initiatives that we signed up to back in August now, seems a million miles away. So I don't think this group needs any context to this, but we declared a climate emergency back in 2019, declaring us as a council to be net zero by 2030 and supporting the city to be in the same journey along the same time frame. And just last month, Cabinet adopted a new climate change strategy, and these initiatives are part of our renewed focus on addressing the climate crisis here. As detailed in the report, there are a number of climate change initiatives and campaigns that we've signed up to, including through the Climate Disclosure Platform, for the CDP Cities and Matchmaker Programme, the Global Covenant on Mayors for Climate and Energy, the Local Governments and Sustainability Platform, and the UN's Race to Resilience campaign. And those first four are really for reducing carbon, so carbon mitigation. But we also signed up to the United Nations Race to Resilience, which is based on addressing the climate change risks, so adapting, increasing our resilience. So it's a broad spread of addressing the climate change risks, not just carbon. So the intended outcomes of these initiatives hopefully show a further commitment and transparency, accountability, and a credibility to the climate change actions that we're doing here in the city. But not just that, so we hope to potentially look at accessing further resources from these platforms, and whether that is technical resources, but potentially financing as well. So we can look at potentially looking at funding further projects that we haven't been able to find internal funding or external funding so far. So hopefully this opens the door to a lot more opportunities for us to start addressing the climate change crisis more, and show ourselves transparently on the international scale as well. There we go. That's it. All good.
Thank you very much. I will jump first to Charlotte. Do you have anything to add? Or
Surprisingly, Councillor Barrett, I don't. You'll be pleased to know. To say it's brilliant, obviously. Thank you.
Russell?
I'm very supportive of this, so I have no questions either.
Oh. Well, thank you very much. I just wanted to say thank you to Christina, because when she came to me and said about all these possible things we could sign up to, I wasn't sure whether we would be able to, but we've been accepted on it, and it gives us access to all these extra things we get to play with and look at. And of course, everything we're doing, I mean, I was at a leadership training course 2 weeks ago, and with counterparts all across the country and Scotland, and I think we should be proud of everything we're doing as a city, as a council, because we are quite far ahead compared to a number of other councils who have also declared a climate emergency as well. But I think, especially with the work Christina's been doing since she arrived here, we are on a better course at the moment than some other councils sadly are. And one thing that did come up was the funding. You know, there seems to be a real lack of funding with everything we need to push forward with. So I do hope government will take notice, especially with our new Prime Minister, that she will allocate more towards the climate emergency that councils really need to be focusing on, because it will take a significant amount of funding to make the changes that we really need to do. On that note, though, I will say that since we've signed up to these initiatives, I've had 2 emails. One invited me to go to New York and speak for 20 minutes at the Rockefeller Centre. I did turn that down because I didn't think it would be very carbon friendly to go for 20 minutes, as much as I would like to go. And I was also invited, well, to a panel at COP27 in Egypt, but I turned that down because we're doing some exciting things here. So I thought it would be much better to be here and do some exciting things going forward, which people will find out about very soon. But it just shows that already from the initiatives we've signed up to, people are paying attention to what Portsmouth are doing. So I look forward to seeing what comes through from that. I look forward to seeing how Christina plays with some of the toys we get from this. But yeah, so that's for noting and information only. But I think it's really important that, you know, we are doing what we can and being shown on an international scale. So, yeah, thank you very much for that, Christina.
So it's probably unusual to be commenting on my own report, but further to what you just said, someone from the UNFCCC and the UN Race to Zero contacted me and asked if we'd consider showcasing the work we're doing on the South Sea Coastal Scheme defence works there, and I'd like to potentially feature that as a good resilience scheme on their website. It hasn't gone any further, but they've reached out to me and said, can we consider doing that? And yes, we will. Yeah.
Fantastic and very exciting. So, yeah, thank you very much. I believe that's the end of the meeting. So thank you everyone for attending, and I will see you next month.